One of the biggest conversations held today amongst beekeepers is whether or not you treat your bees. And this is a big conversation. We've made a video about this in the past, but it was a long time ago, and we want to make a new video basically talking about this subject. I wanted to film outside because it is beautiful outside, but it is so windy that I didn't want you to lose any of the points that we're about to make in this video. It's so important what we're about to explain that we wanted you to be able to receive all of it and hear it clearly. But we're just so excited to talk about this. So without further ado, let's get into it. Good afternoon, beekeepers and bee enthusiasts. How you doing? It's a beautiful day at the farm, and it really is nice outside, but it is windy. And so, we have a big episode for you today of analyzing the Natural Beekeeping Central Commandments. And we feel so strongly about the views we're about to share with you that we didn't want you to be interrupted by the noise of wind and all this stuff. So we decided to take this video on the inside. But yeah, it's beautiful outside. But yeah, let's break right into it. So, of course, part of natural beekeeping, and I try to tell people this all the time, and you've seen me say this 100 times before in our videos, we try to replicate how bees live in the wild. And part of how bees live in the wild is they don't have that human interaction as far as treatment goes. So us as natural beekeepers, we do not treat our bees. We do not give them any kind of medicines, chemicals, supplements, any of that stuff. We don't do any of that. And we've had success so far. So we're going to make a lot of interesting points today. Of course, I think we should, since this is an episode of Analyzing the Natural Beekeeping Central Commandments, we should open our book. It's page 100 and list the next rule that Federal Zootin talks about. And a lot of people have been telling me to put links to this book, so I'm going to start putting links to this book in the description. So if you want to become a natural beekeeper, get this book, Keep Bees with a Smile. It's fantastic. You will love it. It's a great way to keep bees, and we basically base our entire methods of beekeeping based off this book. So, all right, the next rule. Don't subject your bees to any sort of medical treatment. Let them cope with diseases themselves. It's no catastrophe if a weak colony perishes. Any surviving colonies will produce strong and healthy offspring. Now, some of you are going, let the bees die? Like, what? How are we going to let the bees? We've got to help the bees. We've got to treat. We've got to do things for them. But what Zootin says in this book, and this is big, okay? He wants the bees to be able to cope by themselves. Now, yes, there are a few things we do as human beings to assist them, but he wants the bees to be able to cope by themselves. And part of that is allowing the bees to generate healthy genetics, mite-resistant genetics, or other moth-resistant genetics, or, hive beetle-resistant genetics, all those kind of genetics. Zootin wants bees to be able to generate themselves. And if we as people are always treating our bees, then unfortunately what can happen is it can actually weaken their genetics and at the same time strengthen the diseases you're trying to prevent. Because one thing I want to make clear, if you treat, you're still going to have those diseases and stuff in your hive. They're still going to exist. And the ones that survive, the diseases that survive are like the mites that survive. They will produce offspring, and those offspring will be resistant to those treatments you used. And so as time goes on, they will generate more and more and more, and they will get more resistance to those treatments. And that's why treatments, you're always having to get different types of treatments if you are treating your bees. They're always coming out with new treatments, updated treatments, because the diseases and pests grow resistant to old forms of treatments and stuff like that. So we got a lot of interesting things to talk about today. We're going to make some really good points. And above all else, I would ask you not to be overly offended by the cases we're going to make today. The truth is, we think you should be able to keep bees the way you want to keep bees. If you want to treat your bees, treat your bees. But we do not treat our bees. And so we don't want anybody telling us that we have to be forced to do something we don't want to do. We're going to make a lot of cases today as to why we don't treat our bees. So you got a very clear understanding of why we do what we do. So let's just get right into it. So the first thing I want to talk about when discussing our methods is I want to point to a statement that I've heard from some YouTubers. I've heard it in one-on-one conversations with other beekeepers, and that is I hear people say bees today cannot survive without treatment. They just can't do it. They don't have the instinct for it, and today the diseases are so strong that if you do not treat your bees will die. Well, the problem I have with that statement is two examples I will use. The first example, and I talk about this in a lot of our videos, the bees that live in the wild, be it a tree or a roof or under a car, or where the bees that live in the wild, they do so without any human interaction. They have no human interaction, and they do just fine. And some of them perish, and some of them survive. But the bees that survive, they produce healthy offspring that have stronger genetics against disease and pests. And that's what Lazutna is talking about in his Central Commandment. He is saying that if we allow our bees to basically, let the strong colonies survive, then those strong colonies will produce healthy offspring, and those healthy offspring will be more resistant to disease and pest. So we know bees in the wild do just fine. They don't have that human element, and they don't have any treatment, and they survive. Another example I would use is I'm in a group on Facebook, Treatment Free Beekeepers, and there are tens of thousands of beekeepers in this group, and they all keep their bees treatment free, and they do just fine. And some of them have loss, some of them have good years, and they all talk about their methods that they use in this group. And there's different ways to keep bees treatment free, but they all have that rule that they're not going to add medications and all that stuff to their bees because they want their bees to have strong genetics. So there are lots of beekeepers that keep bees treatment free. And I would just say, and for us, what we do now is we've kept bees now naturally since 2019. We've followed this book since 2019. And since then, we've kept bees treatment free. And we've had loss sometimes, and we've always had colonies that survive. And every year we get more and more colonies. So it doesn't matter how much we lose. Every year we have more colonies than the previous year. And last year, we started in 2019, we caught 4 colonies, and last year we were up to 9 colonies. So, we're getting bees every single year. So you can keep bees treatment free. So I don't like the statement. I don't want to hear anybody say that bees cannot survive without treatment, because it's not a factual statement. That is not a factual statement. Because, like I said, there are bees that live in the wild that don't get treatment. There are treatment-free beekeepers that keep bees without any treatment, and they do just fine. So we need to stop spreading this information that bees just can't do it without treatment, because they can do it. So, that's just one thing I want to talk about as far as that goes. So the next point I want to make is people would say, okay, Wes, well, maybe you won't lose all your bees from not treating, but you're going to have a lot more loss than a beekeeper that treats. And I would say that's not necessarily true. And the reason I would say that is because a few examples I'm going to use. Now, I've seen 2 big beekeepers on YouTube, and these aren't the only people, but these are just the 2 examples I'll use. 2 big beekeepers that are very strong proponents of treatment. One of them basically lost 95% of his colonies 1 year, and he had around 20 colonies. The other had around 10 colonies and lost around 100%, or lost 100% of his colonies, lost all his colonies. And I won't bash them, for losing all those colonies, because sometimes you lose colonies. It's just a part of it, and you've got to accept that if you're going to be a beekeeper. You're going to lose colonies sometimes. Sometimes you're going to have worse years than others. But the gentleman one of the gentlemen that lost 95% of the colonies, he said, well, my colonies got mite bombed, and that's why they died. And if you don't know what a mite bomb is, that's what some beekeepers call wild bees or treatment-free bees. Basically, bees that don't get treatment. Apparently, they have more mites. I don't know. But they say they are mite bombs. And so the gentleman was saying, well, my bees got mite bombed, and that's why they died. And I would say to you, if that is your answer to why you had so much loss, then basically you're accepting that any given year that could definitely happen to you, because at the end of the day, you can't stop the wild bees from being there. The wild bees are always going to be there treatment free, and they're going to keep doing their thing. And, there's always going to be treatment free beekeepers that are not treating their bees. So, this problem you have about getting mite bombed, there's nothing you can do. And by the way, I kind of thought that was the purpose of treating in the first place, is to stop the mites. So if your bees are still getting mite bombed, even with you treating, then I would say, what's the purpose? Like, what? that's the way I look at it. Like, if it's going to happen anyway, even though you're treating, then at the end of the day, what's the purpose? And of course, the other beekeeper, his answer was basically, well, I didn't treat enough, and so I need to treat more the next year, since my bees died. And that's one way to look at it. If we lose all of our bees in a year, we generally look at what we do and we say, okay, what could we have done different? Not, what did we do and how can we keep doing that even more the next year? So that's just the way we look at it. Again, I'm not bashing these two beekeepers. I'm giving you examples of beekeepers who are very strong proponents of treatment, and they still lost all or almost all of their bees. So just because you treat doesn't mean you can still lose all of your bees. It can still happen. And for us, this is the last example I'm going to use. We kept bees from 2011 to 2017, and we kept them traditionally. We did all the traditional rules. We studied all the traditional methods. We did all those things. And when we did those, we treated every year. We used oxalic acid some years. We used mite strip some years. We used all those things, and our bees still died. And I don't mean losing one or two colonies. I mean, like, we would have 10 colonies a year and lose pretty much all those colonies. Just most years we lost all our colonies, and that's just the way it is. That's the way it was. And so was that just because we were treating our bees? No, I'm not saying that, because when we became natural beekeepers in 2019, we totally changed how we were keeping bees. Like, everything we did, we changed basically. And becoming treatment-free beekeepers was part of that. And now, since then, we've had success as treatment-free beekeepers. We've kept bees every year, and we've always had bees that survive. We do lose colonies because that's a part of it, but we've always had colonies survive, and every year we've had more colonies than the previous year. So it works for us. So I don't really buy into that notion that, just because you keep bees with treatment, that you're going to have better survival rates than a treatment-free beekeeper. You can still have some heavy loss if you treat your bees. So yeah. All right. So the last thing we want to bring up is I want to talk about the benefits that we see in treatment-free beekeeping. One of the big reasons why we choose to keep bees treatment-free. So I want you to ask yourself, if you're a beekeeper, if you just left your bees alone and stopped doing anything to those bees, like you just stopped touching them, like you stopped messing with them, you left them alone, would they still be alive after about a year? Would they still be there? Or would they all be gone? And the thing is one of the big reasons why I like to keep bees, or why we like to keep bees, and why we like to, support the environment with honeybees, is we want honeybees, or the honeybees we produce, to have strong genetics. So when they swarm and they go out into the woods, they will have a strong chance of survival. Now, if you treat all the time, you should know that if your bees swarm, and if that colony is reliant on treatment, then if they swarm into a tree or something like that, their chance of survival is very low, because they don't have the natural genetics to handle disease and pests. So they are very reliant on that treatment. And now that they don't have that treatment anymore from you, they don't have a good chance of survival. Versus us, when we don't treat our bees, we let them do what they're going to do. If they swarm, and we do let them swarm, we don't stop our bees from swarming, they have a strong chance of surviving because they've already got those strong genetics that allow them to fight off disease and pest. So they have a good chance. And, you know, the reason why I brought up that point a second ago when I said, you know, would your bee survive after a year, is I would like to know, or I like knowing that if something happened to me or my family, but the land was still here, the bees would be okay. Like now, yes, the hives over time would degrade, but they wouldn't be dead within a year. Like they would still be there for quite some time. And we want to keep bees in a way that basically says, you know, the bees can live without that human interaction if they so choose. They actually have a chance. You know, I don't like keeping bees in a way that basically says, without that human interaction, you're not going to make it. Like, I don't like that. I like keeping bees in a way where they can survive on their own. And treatment-free beekeeping is a big factor in that. It's a big factor. Like I said just a second ago, you know, if you treat all the time, then your bees are going to be relying on treatment. And if they swarm and leave, they're going to need that treatment. So, you know, I'm not going to other YouTubers that treat and say, I don't like what you're doing, you know, downvote, mean comment, all that other stuff. I don't do that because, like I said earlier, I think beekeepers should be able to keep bees the way they want to keep bees. And that is very important. I think you should be able to keep bees the way you want to keep bees. And, you know, B-Boy Bill, he's got an awesome channel. He teaches how to build hives, and he talks about his colonies, and he keeps Land's hives. But he lives in a state where they were really pushing legislation that would force a beekeeper to treat their bees. And I don't think this is a good thing. I don't support that at all, because truth is, if you're a treatment beekeeper, you wouldn't want me passing legislation that would force you to not treat your bees. So at the end of the day, I think we should all be able to keep bees the way we want to keep bees. And I think that's a good thing. We all love our bees. We all want to do good things for our bees, you know, so we should be able to keep them the way we want to keep them. And treatment free is what we choose. And so we're very, we find that very important. So I hope you enjoyed this video. We have one more episode of analyzing the Natural Beekeeping Central Commandments. It's going to be a shorter one, but we've loved making this series. Treatment-free beekeeping is a big commandment in natural beekeeping, and it's a very important factor. So, you know, it was a really good discussion. We hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, we'll see you soon.